I know men who won't hire women now, she said on the set of Morning Joe. Right now, any woman can say anything and a man's career is ruined. Now, a lot of women can say things that are true and the man's career should be ruined. But the problem is that any woman can say anything and that's it. It's over. Is that how we're running business now? I watched this exchange on the Morning Joe. I'm sure you've seen the clip too. And of course, it's true. Legal departments of very large corporations that include women in them are saying, put a freeze on hiring women. Now, you might be a armchair lawyer and you might say, how can they do this? Okay. Years ago, I didn't record it, but I went to apply for an apartment. And the guy literally said on the phone, we don't hire you. We don't take your kind. When I spoke to a lawyer, he says, without the actual evidence of the recording, anything outside of that, it is virtually impossible to prove discrimination in a court of law. Now, I'm sure you've seen the guy who did the snowflake test. This is on your application, you have a questionnaire, and the questionnaire it says, what does America mean to you? How do you feel about guns? How do you feel about police? When's the last time you cried and for what reason? And he called it the snowflake test. And he said, this is a personality test, nothing more. I can literally weed out social justice warriors, activists, anybody with this test. And it's a personality test, it's accepted. And because it really does not discriminate, because we can set the standard on our side and it's arbitrary, anybody who can take it, anybody can pass, but if you don't pass, you don't get hired. And that is fine. On an application, you can have a personality test on there and it can have a questionnaire. What you don't know, it's saying, are you male or female? You mark female, they don't hire you. It is impossible to prove discrimination outside of somebody coming out like Perry Mason breaking down on the stand and saying, yes, I didn't want to speak with her, or I'm the one who said it, or I'll say it again. Outside of that, it's virtually impossible to bring up a discrimination case. Oh, people make claims of discrimination with the law all the time. And you know where they try it? The same place that these women are trying these men. In the court of public opinion. Coca-Cola did this. I'm angry. I'm going to get a lawyer. How dare they? Let me call every newspaper in the nation. And every newspaper in the nation wants the stories about that. How can Coca-Cola do this, that, and the other? How can MSNBC do this, that, and the other? Now, they're talking about the death of the Me Too movement. But the real death of the Me Too movement came when the organizers of the actual Me Too movement and the women's marches and the everything started having people actually come forward and said, this woman did this to me. Well, then all of this spike in false accusations against men now all came to light. By the way, we knew that Sarah was not doing anything. In fact, the man wasn't even in the same city for the entire week that she's claiming. Mika Brzezinski, of course, appears to be a reasonable woman, although she's a staunch liberal, staunch establishment Democrat. I mean, just so far left that it's it's a out of the park home run left field, right? if I'm getting the allegory correct, I don't know. When the ball goes over the left field into the bleachers, she's left. But she says, or she alludes to that she feels that you should have some sort of evidence before you're bringing stuff against men. And she went on to say, if that's how we're going to do business, that means that all of you men sitting around me right now, in 20 years, some woman can just walk up and you are defending these women, it doesn't make sense. She says, I know men right now who will not hire women for that very reason. Because women can say anything and ruin a 30-year career, even of a man who is lauded with being holy than holy, beyond reproach, respect coming out of his eyeballs, just coming out of his ear, oozing out of his mouth, and just respect, respect, respect for everything that he's done. And a woman can walk up and said, he did this. And not only is his reputation ruined, he's fired, the whole everything. And the companies are firing the men, even when the allegation isn't even remotely serious. Even when the allegation isn't even remotely believable. Why? Because now the companies feel that they must do something to show to women, the biggest purchasers of items of anything, that they are very serious and have zero tolerance for anything such as abuse against women. Zero tolerance. And that zero tolerance comes out to even when some woman who's not even credible makes a clear false allegation, even when the man can prove that he was nowhere in sight, doesn't even know the woman. In covering the Bill Cosby case, I spoke to you about a story that who's the other old comedian? He said he didn't even know the woman, but when he was on a flight, when he was on a trip, he was going somewhere. He stopped by at a bar, and he sat at the bar, and some woman came up to him, shook his hand, said, "I'm a big fan," and somebody took a picture of her and him. That was it. And that was 20 years before, right? And she says, "This is your baby. Pay me XYZ amount of money." And his lawyer said, "Pay it. In fact, double it." He says, "I've never been with that woman. Never. I don't know that woman." And they said, "They have proof." "What's the proof?" "A picture of her and him at a bar." There you go. And they didn't do DNA in those days, so he didn't even think about saying, let's have a DNA test. No such thing. A woman can say anything. Companies are private, first of all. You have no freedom of speech with companies. You have nothing, none of that stuff. And the discrimination even is different because you do have the right to association. Till this day, we have white-only golf clubs. Till this day. You think they can't discriminate? Private companies can discriminate. If that were the case, we couldn't have Mormons, Muslims, Buddhist temples. That's all discrimination. Technically speaking, of course, but that's discrimination. You wouldn't be able to have a woman's club. You wouldn't be able to have a woman's charity. You wouldn't be able to have any charity, because then they could say, well, you're only giving this money to little girls. That's discrimination. So all of you armchair lawyers, sit back, take a breather. You don't know what you're talking about when you're saying that's discrimination. Or shall I say, yes, that's discrimination. And it's perfectly legal. A lot of people use your ignorance of the law, or your not understanding of the law, or your lack of understanding of reality, and use it against you to gather you up into groups, put you out in the street, and have you yelling and throwing stuff because you don't understand. Legal departments are telling companies, do not hire women. And I said this in my other video. The final straw comes when they do all the research, and the research shows 100% of the women that you have hired into this company have all quit within 5 years. And if they're under the age of 35, they quit within 1 or 2 years. 100% quit. If any woman tries to bring a case and say they're discriminated, they didn't hire me, the company literally can pull that file out and put that right on the judge's bench and say, here's our experience with hiring women in our company. We don't have time and the money to train women, and they quit within 2 years. And here's the cost of training that woman. She hasn't even made the company back the money it costs to train her. In fact, we're going to countersue and say she owes us the money that we spent on training her. And hey, depending on how the judge feels, he could say you owe the company $50,000. Thank y'all for watching. Leave a like, subscribe. Bye-bye.